Welcome to part 2 of Cafe Dialogues.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see a lot of you came back. We didn't scare you away last week. And thank you for joining us last week, so I don't have to review a lot of what we covered. I'm not planning on it, but as it sort of helps lay the foundation for today's discussion, you know, we might reference a few things we said last week, but not really going into depth. And if there is anyone on the call who wasn't here last week, Jeffrey recorded it, and you spiritual enrichment. Well, I think it went in the messenger, and it's also on the YouTube channel for spiritual enrichment, or just email me or Jeffrey.
Oh, Christy, may I suggest that folks mute themselves during the presentation?
Sure.
And then we'll certainly have time for questions and answers, and then you can unmute yourself when you need to make a response. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna follow a similar format where we're gonna talk for a little bit up front. If you have questions throughout, we love if you use that chat feature because we can address them right away. Or if it's something maybe we want to spend a little more time on, hold it until we'll open up. We have some time at the very end for Q&A. And you'll be hearing from me and Jeff and from Lenora and probably Lisa, because she has so much in her brain about how we do things that she's very valuable. She can insert lots of little gems. All right, so I'm going to share my screen here. Whoops. Sorry. Sorry, technical difficulties.
I think you could just probably hit that yellow button up there. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I see somebody else's screen sharing. There we go. Okay.
Someone was screen sharing, and I.
Go get the girls. There we go. All right.
Okay.
Are we good? Everybody see that? Okay. So a quick recap from last week. We won't go into it, but we talked about the team, the journey, what happened, and who is our primary audience. We did the competitive audit and figured out where are the opportunities where we can stand apart. And we talked a lot about social media and how we can use it more effectively. And then the primary goals of the project, which is basically for WCC to grow. We had a couple of outstanding questions from last time, which we wanted to just address because we didn't get to everything. There were a couple left in the chat. I think Andrea and Greg had both made some suggestions about how our wording might be a little more inclusive, both of which were great suggestions. So we're gonna actually go ahead and just implement those into the copy on the website. And then there was a question from Paul that was emailed in about the Not Church as Usual brand idea. Thank you for teeing it up for us, because we are going to talk about that first and foremost in this presentation. So all of the things that we talked about last week led us to the brand idea of Not Church as Usual. And Jeff, did you want to say a few things about that?
Yeah, just had to remember to unmute there. So good morning, everybody, and so glad you're all with us this morning. Just very briefly, as a member of the team and as senior pastor, I want to thank the team again for all their amazing work on our church's behalf, and thank everyone who has been involved in marketing efforts through the years, because this was clearly an evolution and a build on all of those prior efforts. So we're very grateful for all the time that's been put in by staff and by lay leadership. Specifically, thanks to Christy for her superb project management. Anyone on the presentation last week would see how detailed and in-depth this process has been, and tracking all of it as it shifted in somewhat dramatic ways during COVID in response to going to virtual mode. All that tracked beautifully by Christy. So Christy, thank you. Everybody can clap, muted or not, for Christy on that. And a special thanks to Lisa as well for bringing to bear not only her great intellect about marketing, but her heart for the church and her understanding of how to apply marketing's best practices in the churchscape, which is not an easy thing to do. And definitely thanks to our partners. And I'll get back to that in just a moment. So per the question about not church as usual, this is a great question that's come up. And the question has basically been, Paul and others have asked this, we've heard it from a few people. So what does that mean for us internally? Does that mean we'll be doing, dramatically new things? Are we going to toss out everything we've been doing in the past? Will people not be able to recognize the church? The answer to all of those is no. So to briefly pull back and look at two audiences, remember, we're trying to focus on external and internal audiences with all of our messaging. That's always been true, continues to be true. And when we think about that external audience, writ large, but also specifically millennials, we want to be speaking to how any negative perception that they may have about church based on hearsay or indirect experience or direct experience, we're trying to say, we're not that kind of church. If that's church as usual, we're not that kind of church. And Lenore is going to get into the depth of how we are communicating that, dimensionalizing that on our website. When we think about the internal audience, not church as usual is just a reminder, an important reminder, a galvanizing reminder that Christ ever and always asks us to be not church as usual, not his words. He may not have said those exact words, but never wants us to get stuck in our ways or too comfortable in our practices, such that we don't continue to evolve and make the word fresh and our embodiment of Christ's love fresh for our day here and now, and as we look forward toward what's to come. So it's a definitely both and message, focusing externally and internally, and we'll talk more about that. Brief word of intro for Lenora and Small Good and Milen, who is her partner in crime. And remembering everybody needs to mute if you can do that so people can hear the audio. Thank you. This process and this partnership with Small Good, and a brief comment about their name, their goal was to found an agency that can do meaningful work in the world. And if they could just achieve some small good, that they would be proud and happy to be part of that. They achieve far more than small good. They should be tremendous good, should be the name of their partnership and their company. But our partnership and our process with them has truly been, and this is a testament to how the Spirit has been moving, an embodiment of what church is at its best, what church process is at its best: Spirit-led, open to Christ's, God's prompting, and born of prayer and discernment. Yes, marshaling all the facts, doing the critical analysis, but discerning and prayerfully asking, what does this mean for us? How does it allow us to speak our truth into the world and to let Christ's word be spoken out, both internally and externally? And Lenora and Milen understand not only marketing, but the church milieu, if you would, the church marketplace, deeply, profoundly. And they've been able to bring that to bear as we have entrusted them. And it's a trust well placed with our dearest thing, which is our church and how we message about our church to the world. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lenora and to again thank her and Milen for all of their amazing leadership. Welcome, Lenora.
Thank you. Thank you. And hello, everybody. It's great to be with you this morning. I probably met some of you or talked to some of you on the phone along the way, because we did spend a lot of time talking to people and listening as much as possible. And but I don't always put the faces with the names. So if we have had a conversation, I might not know it's you, but thank you for doing that. So yeah, as Christy and Jeff have said, it's been an incredible partnership. And as a person who has been in advertising for over 30 years, you don't get these kind of partnerships every step of the way. I've got to be very honest. I worked at Leo Burnett for 25 years, and it was, there were moments when you were just like, wow, this is working just like it could and it should. But there were a lot of moments when it wasn't. I'm sure Lisa can attest to those experiences. But I would say that this has been one of those experiences which I really value and treasure because of the team's work with us, and you know, the honesty and inputs that they've had, the openness that they've had, as well as just the, I mean, I think it's definitely been this spirit-led process, and I think we would all say that probably. Um, so just a quick background about me, and then I'll go into my slides and talk about all that stuff. But um, I don't know, I think everybody in the committee knows this. I'm the daughter of a Southern Baptist preacher. And so I kind of grew up going to church every day. And at the time I was born, I'm relatively old. So, you know, it wasn't, I think if I could have become a preacher myself, or I think there was a part of me that wanted to be that, following my dad's footsteps. But at that time, at that place, that wasn't as much of an option. And in fact, I was very strongly discouraged from doing that. So I often think that I went into the next best thing for me, which was advertising. So I think that it really is both. Those kinds of things are about putting messages into the world, and you can put good messages in the world, or you can put negative ones out there, and we have had our share of both. I'm sure everybody has experienced both of those. So my goal as a person, I think, was always to be, in a way, a minister wherever I was, you know, to really try to bring the good out of companies that I could find, and really find their core reason for being and purpose, and what good they were bringing into the world, and how that kind of coalesced with what people really needed. So when I was in my 20s, after I kind of left the whole Southern Baptist thing, and as you can imagine, through the years, I was a part of a variety of different churches. I've been non-denominational, I've been in post-evangelical, I've been in mainline denominations, and, you know, all kinds of different churches through the years. But one of the things that really stuck with me when I was in my early 20s, I became a big fan of the writer and minister, actually pastor, Frederick Buechner. And Buechner had a quote that really, I think, changed my life in a lot of ways, which was, he was talking about calling, vocation, and he was saying, you know, it's where your deep gladness meets the world's deep need. And, you know, it was like one of those moments where it's like God spoke to me and said, I have this gift, I have these things to give. And you'll find out really quickly, you've already found out, I'm a very emotional person. So Jeff and I get along very well on that front, yes. But it is really important to me to sort of look at, you know, here's what I have to give. And there is a deep need in the world for good messages out there. So I gave my life to doing that in any way I could. And a lot of that was through advertising. And I've done that many years through major agencies. And but I've also most recently been really privileged to work with Malin, and we started Small Good to take the best of what we've learned along the way, and also be able to make some choices about who we work with, and make sure that they're trying to really bring more good into the world from top to bottom. So that's been a great and exciting journey for us the last several years. So one of the pieces of having your own company, I will just say, is I don't have to work for clients I don't want to. So what a benefit that is. And I think that that's one of the things that when I come into a project, when Melinda and I take on a project, we do it with a lot of passion, and we do it with a lot of sense of, this is what we're called to do, quite honestly, you know? And that was definitely how we felt about Winnetka Congregational. And so it has been truly kind of a great experience from start until now. And I'm very excited about, because this is kind of, in a way, a culmination, a milestone on the journey where you are right now. But I think it's really just a step on a really exciting journey that you have ahead. So that's a little bit about me. Maybe we should talk a little bit about how we came up with Not Church as Usual and the process. And I think you went through a lot of this process conversation last week, and sort of along the way, we did a lot of research. We did a lot of, you know, kind of both one-on-ones with folks in the church, as well as some cultural research, a lot of cultural research that, I have access to as in my job, but also through the Christian circles that I know about and work with. And then also, looking at past and the surveys and looking at what your website does now. So we did a lot of research. And I think that one of the things that came out from that, and to really build on what Jeff was saying, is that this idea about not church as usual comes very, I think, honestly out of who you are right now. I think that it's not something that you have maybe necessarily put into those 4 words, but I do think it is something you have always been. And it's sometimes hard to tell that when you're in the middle of it, but I've been to a lot of churches and I've heard a lot of people who no longer go to church. And I've talked to a lot of people who have really been burnt by churches and who are looking for a church that's like this one, that is open, that's open to doubts, that's open to question, that's also really committed to following Christ, whatever that means, and trying to figure out what that might mean, that's spiritual, but also quite, has a concern for people who are on the margins, and LGBTQ inclusive in all the deepest kind of ways. So those kind of churches don't really, they're not run of the mill by any means. It's not church as usual as it exists right now. So I think who you deeply are really is a part of this message, even though you might not articulate it that way or even think about it that way. So it really that was interesting, as well as all the research that we did and all the work that we've done really talks about how people who are leaving the church these days, people who are not necessarily happy in their churches, but kind of maybe trying to hang in there, but they're really struggling with this whole, needing a community where they don't feel judged or told what to believe. They really want to wrestle with the big questions, and they're looking for a deeper spiritual experience than they might be having at yoga class, though yoga has been very good for a lot of people, and book club has been a great sort of meaningful place for a lot of people. And church has not always been that way for them. And that's definitely what they're looking for. And I think many churches have sort of failed on that front. And I think that the fact that when that kind of starts in that place is incredibly powerful. And I think also, as Jeff said, it's a great challenge to always be, for the internal folks, to always be ready to sort of be like Christ and making all things new. We're ready for the new wineskins wherever they show up. So I think that there's a real sort of both celebration in those words for you all, and I think there's also a call in those words. So I think it's great for the church, and I think sometimes it's just really like, oh, but doesn't that seem so negative? And I think the piece of that, to me, that I think is really crucial is that it's not negative in the sense that you're saying you are a positive. This is a positive. You're not being what the other kinds of churches out there have been for people. And so there is a positive in that, but it's 4 words, and it's trying to sort of get people's attention enough to want to know more about it. So I think that's really crucial as we're talking to that outside audience that may have written your church off. They may have driven by and said, oh man, that's going to be church as usual. And they may be people who have just kind of almost written church off totally. So that's kind of where those 4 words stemmed from. And then if you go to the next slide, Christy. So that is kind of all summarized in this sort of short statement that, many people are really tired of church as usual, and they're looking for this community where they can be really accepted for who they are and find a deeper connection to God and what really matters. And so we exist to be that kind of church. I think Jeff has spoken to this very honest, before, about both faithful and open-minded, spiritual and question embracing, profoundly inclusive and unabashedly grounded in Jesus. And that's a space that not many churches sit in. And I would say that it's a unique and differentiating space for you, to use an advertising term about that. So we really are excited about that. And for all these kind of reasons, it's inviting to new folks, including a lot of millennials who have pretty much, very skeptical of churches. And then also, I think it reflects what I heard in a lot of conversations with the folks. We don't have all the answers here. Community is why I'm here. We don't always see things the same way, but we talk about it. We wrestle with it together. And then I think the nice piece about this is it has a strong point of view. It isn't wishy-washy, and it sort of challenges people to take a second look. And I think it definitely differentiates you among churches in the area. I think that it takes a stance that says, we're trying very intentionally and purposefully to be inclusive, open-minded, justice-building, and Jesus-centered. That a church that kind of does that, and does that openly and with joy and gladness, is really a powerful force in the world today. So that's kind of how we ended up there. Our elevator speech is kind of just another way of saying those words. We try to do these so that, in case you're ever trying to figure out, well, how would I explain this to anybody? So it sort of starts with I work at Winnetka Congregational, but don't let the church part of our name fool you. We definitely aren't interested in church as usual, because we're both profoundly inclusive and unabashedly grounded in Jesus, a place where you can be all of who you are, and also find the courage to be who you really want to be. A church where your head will feel welcome, and so will your heart. A church full of real and perfect people with plenty of questions and doubts, but all on a journey together to learn to love God, ourselves, and everyone else on this planet as Jesus loved them. And we'd love to have you join us. So however you end up perhaps saying these kind of words, we wanted to give you that kind of succinct statement about the whole thing, that we really kind of bring to life much more on the website, which we'll share more about that with you later. So personality wise, I hope you get the personality sense from this, that we're trying to show what a friendly, open-minded, humble, and vulnerable place this is. We're not this place where everybody's trying to be perfect, but we're a trusting place and a hopeful place, and we're vibrant and bright. And so we've really tried to capture that personality in all the things we do. And from a voice standpoint, I love this group. I love the spiritual enrichment group. I love everything that you guys have done in terms of asking good questions, being thoughtful and thought-provoking, and all that you do. That's a rare, wonderful gift that you have, that you're offering the world. And being also real and inspiring and wise and witty. And so we want to try to capture that in your voice, in the words that we say on your website, in the kinds of ways we say things in social media, in all the communication. I think trying to sound human and real and inspiring, and also thought-provoking, and having some inspirational kinds of wisdom to share and some humor to share, I think is really important, and really a gift that you have to give. So I thought I'd jump into sort of where this took us in terms of the visuals for the brand. So I think you guys went into the whole competition, what everybody else looks like out there. And I got to say, there's a whole lot of green, aqua, black, and rust out there. And, if you sort of put all those churches together on a page, I think as we did, one of the things you notice is that, there's kind of some similarities both in messaging, and there's also some similarities in this look of those. And I think we really wanted to find a way that send a signal that your brand is different. And so this is kind of the logo that we ended up with. And it's kind of one element, but it brings together a typeface. And I think the thing, this graphic symbol, one of the things I love about this is that it comes out of the colors, which are really intrinsic to a lot of the color in your space, in your architecture, which is beautiful and which clearly sets you apart as well. So I would say it integrates well with that. It doesn't feel jarring, Like if I see a social media post with these kinds of colors and then I walk into your church building, I'm going to say, oh yeah, this feels like I'm in the right place. It's a very subtle kind of thing, but it really makes a big difference. And I think some of the choices that you've made along the way in terms of how the church looks can be incorporated into those colors so that your website also feels like the church and the logo feels like your church. So I think this is not in any way a perhaps traditional symbol for a church. It is not church as usual in terms of church logos as usual, because you know, if you were sort of doing, you know, 101 for church logos, you'd probably have like a cup and, you know, bread, or you'd have a cross, or you would have, you know, a dove or some sort of more traditional symbol. And I think what we tried to do was create a new symbol, a new visual representation of sort of people coming together, individuals different, but coming together and connected on this journey together, working together to make a whole. And so we really found it to be fresh and differentiating. Nobody else can have this particular look to their logo, and definitely not church as usual. And we feel like the nice piece of this is it is authentic because it was inspired by a piece of your building, which is that beautiful chandelier. But of course, it's so much more than that. It is really, you know, represents symbolically so much more than that. And I think most people who see it for the first time, who don't go to your church, would have no idea that this is about a chandelier in your church. But I think for those of you who are, you know, a part of this church, you will have that sort of sense of connection. And again, I think for people who come in, I think it really fits well with both what they experience in the virtual world will be in sort of integrated with what they experience in the real world. So that was really what we were trying to do with this. So now I may be talking too fast, so please, I'm sure you can write questions or comments, but we wanted to talk a little bit, I wanted to talk about the website a little bit. And so one of the things that we felt was crucial to do on your website, and it's something, you know, we do a lot of work with companies of various kinds. We've done a lot of work in terms of what a website needs to be, what that experience is like. And for many people today, I have to say, your website, that's where they're going to visit. And that's where they're going to spend time first before they go to your church. And it may be a while. They may visit several times before they go to your church. And it is really, it's really your front porch these days. You know, it's the entryway to your church, the vestibule of your church, if you will. You know, it's really the way that it's crucial. It's crucial that it expresses visually who you are. And I think and both, it needs to say in words who you're trying to be, what your beliefs are, what you're about. And one of the key things that you'll see on this is that, as I mentioned before, that Frederick Buechner quote that I love so much, it's really, the website is really about bringing out who you really are at your core and how that intersects with the world's needs, what people are looking for. That's kind of how we speak to people on the website. So we do come at it from a sense of the person coming to your website who's new, who's never been here before, the person who's doesn't really know much about you. What are the kind of questions they'll have? What are the kinds of fears they're going to have? What will the issues be, baggage that they bring with them? And we want to be able to sort of address that in real ways, that are natural ways, and give them sort of a warm welcome to your church through a digital vehicle. So, so even, you know, from the navigation at the top, you'll see just real simple kind of navigation, who we are, connect. It's like what people want to do. I want to connect. Yeah, I got to figure out how I might do that there. I want to grow. I'd like to care. I care about the world. How do they care there? So very simple in that way. We've recently added virtual church as a point on your navigation, which is so crucial. And then you'll notice also that I'm new is up there. And they did this case study that, like, most people, when they're coming to your website who are new, don't find good visitor information. So you probably know this already. You had an I'm new section on your previous site, but making that crisp and easy to find and easy to navigate and really answering the questions they're asking is crucial for what you're trying to accomplish, and bringing new folks in and really sharing the good news of what Winnetka Congregational is all about. So the copy throughout, I think one of the things that there probably won't be too many surprises along the way, because it's kind of reflects a lot of the stuff I've just been talking about. But it's really meant to be conversational and personal sounding, and be reflective of the kind of tone and that friendly tone we were talking about, thought-provoking, and some wisdom there, but also just very accessible. We've loved using these testimonials, little short quotes throughout, and people really look to those to kind of say, well, what kind of people go to this church? What kind of things do they think? What do they like there? And you'd be amazed how much a quote from several people in your church, or one or two people in your church, could go in terms of, well, yeah, I could relate to that, or I get that, and I feel those things too. So throughout, we tried to work some quotes. You'll see on the homepage too, we've tried to make it easy to kind of figure out what are in each of those sections. So it's very easy to navigate. And we've tried to use photography that, primarily this is like 90% throughout the site, which is maybe 95% are all shots from your church that are kind of amazing. And when you put them all together like this, and it's like, wow, that's a place I'd like to go. So we've really tried to do that throughout the site, making really good use of people and faces, and showing the diversity of the congregation. And then, of course, here's the hardworking part of your site, the footer, as we call it. But it really gets to those people who just want to know quickly, what time is worship? And I got to say, when you do websites, one of the things that people complain about the most is it's not easy to find this stuff on some websites. So the way we've designed the site is it's there and it's always there. So it's very easy to find on every page. So not only what time is worship, but office hours, and the about section, which includes really quick little things like inclusion statement. A lot of people will come looking for that right away. Your safe church policy, how to get in touch, and then some quick links there. And then an invitation to sign up for the newsletter so you can learn more. And actually a donate button as well. So as we go through each section, for example, under the Connect section, as you can see, we've sort of featured great photos from, worship in action in a moment, which is I just love this photo. And really trying to bring to life this idea about who you are. All are welcome. All of who you are is welcome in our worship gatherings. And, I think that that's, again, it's really an important statement to make. And I think it's one that you can back up, which is really important, because too many people have had the experience of going to churches and sort of experiencing the opposite of that, that really all of who they are isn't welcome. And so to say that up front and out loud is really, really crucial. So that's kind of the quick oversight, and I'm sure you may have other questions as we go along. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted me to cover, Christy, that I didn't cover.
No, we just, we have a couple more slides I was going to go through for everyone, just sort of, because it's not just the website. Remember, we did a lot of communications overhaul. So I will run through a couple of elements. We will hear more from Lenora in the Q&A. But let me just finish out showing people kind of the befores and afters of some of the other elements that we worked on. So you all probably were very familiar with the messenger before. It was, if you remember, it was a big scroll, you would have to scroll, and we changed our whole email platform we have a new system called HubSpot, which allows all of our emails from the church to be a lot more relevant, and you can find the information that you need without it getting cut off at the end. So that's one more thing that was a before and an after. And then we talked a lot about social media last week. the steps that people take before they come into a church. And we said, you know, we weren't really nurturing these foundational pieces with our social media before. And so you can see this is WCC on Instagram before we tackled this project. You know, remember too, we said on Instagram, 70% of teenagers are on Instagram. So I ask, do these photos look like something a teenager would click on and say, oh, I would like to learn more about that? Let me show you. This is WCC on Instagram after our project. And it's, you know, there's thought-provoking things. There are fun-looking families. There's photos of youth, messages that are relevant to teenagers. So really good messaging. And then you can see our Facebook posts similarly have a very similar look, feel. We're, you know, using the same kinds of messaging that match, you know, on our website and our newsletters. Everything looks like it's coming from the same church. And not only is the church doing this, but the youth social media pages have a consistent look and feel. And even Rummage got this cute new little logo, the elephant with the water spray. And so there, now you can sort of get a sense that Rummage and the youth are part of this church, and we all work together. So again, this is what we looked like before the project, our digital elements, lots of logos, lots of fonts, lots of colors, a lot of green. And this is more like what we look like now, way more consistent. People can understand, you know, who we are from all of this. It's not like, well, they look like this here and they look like that there. It's like, no, we all look the same. And then, what does all this mean? What do we have here? Why do we do this big project? You know, what are we done? No, we're not done. We're definitely not done. This is where we need your help. We need the congregation. We need you to start using this brand, embrace it as your own, not church as usual. We went through the elevator speech. Those are some words you can use. Hopefully you feel it, you understand, yes, that is my church, and you use it, you tell people that. Social media, we need to really be better as a congregation of liking the posts and commenting. Social media is intended to be social, which means it's not just the church putting stuff out there. It means the church is putting stuff out there and we're engaging back and we're talking to one another online. And it doesn't really work if we just put stuff out there and nobody responds. We need to look like and feel like, just like you would on a Sunday morning when we were in person, you would talk, you would say, oh, how are you doing? I love that. Thanks. You know, share this with your friend. Oh, hey, so-and-so just said something. We really want to do that online, promote the feeling that we all know already exists in the church. And we're going to be recruiting, no experience necessary. The only thing you need is to have some social media account. We're going to be recruiting some social media ambassadors. Anybody who wishes to do so is welcome to volunteer. We're going to put something in the messenger here coming up soon. But basically, you would get some official training. Lenora and Malin have offered to do some training on how you can help the church through your social media. And it's not as hard as you think. You know, a couple hours a week would be awesome. It's going to be, you know, we'll gather some people who are interested. We'll have a little training session on Zoom. And then, you know, as you feel comfortable, you will engage more with the church online, which will help us get the likes and the shares and the followers and all of that, which we desperately need. So stay tuned for that. And I think at this point, I wanted to thank Lenora for her presentation and Jeff and everyone on my team, and we'll open it up for questions. I did also want to say we're going to cut things off with 2 minutes to spare because we do have a little video that we wanted to share with you. It's sort of a little gift because it's a work of love that the team put together. And as we put it together, it just reminded us of how grateful we are to be a part of this congregation. So we'll play this. It's just a 1.5-minute long video, but we'll wrap up with the video. So any questions?
Christy, I just want to add one thing here, because again, back to that very concrete question of, so what does not church as usual mean for our congregation, those that are already members, those that already are affiliated with it? And one of those things is how we all can, each of us, staff and lay members alike, share this message. And in the past, that may have felt awkward to do, or that may not have been our culture as a church. Sometimes sharing can feel like proselytizing, which is certainly not what we want to do, not what we feel called to do. Our goal is not to convert people, it's to share a good word. And if it resonates with someone, great. And in keeping with the fact that the number one reason that people cite for coming to a church, be it virtually now or in person, we'll get back to that someday, hope and pray, is a personal invitation. And that's because they trust the source when they're invited in that way. So in company with whatever we're saying on our website, through our social media, through our printed materials, during a worship service, it is the personal invitation. We wanted to create messaging that was true to who we are, that spoke our truth out into the world, represented us in a way that showed who we are and who we continue to evolve to be, and that felt like it could be naturally shared, not like proselytizing and trying to convert someone, but I'm just sharing about something I care about and that really feels great. And to give you bites and bits and a website you could refer people to that would feel natural and easy. And that's been a really important hurdle that we have identified to try and help each of us, staff included, to overcome as we talk about the church. So part of Not Church as Usual is sharing, and part of our work was to enable that to happen in a natural way.
Christy and team, I thank you. And can we return to a screen where we can all see one another? Would that be okay, Christy?
Yep.
Okay, great. There is one question that was in the chat. Do you want to go with that one?
Yeah, I see the question from Chuck about metrics. What metrics can be leveraged to gauge effectiveness of new messages and communication? So great question. I'm excited about this. We're in the process. We're in the process of identifying what those metrics are. And the team will be working on that. But there are definitely ways that we can track what wording, what things were searched, what things were effective, what got the most clicks, which social media posts were most liked. And we're looking at that and starting to track that because we didn't really have a cohesive communication strategy before. We don't have a lot of data, but now that the website is up and the social media is running, we are able to start tracking that stuff. And then the council just approved this week, yay, an advert campaign. So we will be using some of those metrics to figure out how our advertising campaign will run.
And I just want to add, traditionally a corporation or even a very large organization would measure some brand empathy measures and brand, and when I say brand, I mean awareness of the church and consideration of the church. Those kinds of tracking studies where you'd need a baseline first are very expensive relative to what our budget is. So we are going directly to more hard business metrics. We will be looking at length of engagement, number of people engaged, number of visitors, and track that as we can all the way to, and hopefully when we open again, physical visitors, but certainly people who participate in our various events, not only worship, but part of being a social media ambassador will be your ability or your opportunity to let people know about, make them aware of the various ways that you can be engaged with Winnetka Congregational Church. And I really encourage folks to sign up to be a social media ambassador. It's fun. It will actually augment your enjoyment of social media anyway in your regular life. And we want people of all ages. We are very happy to have teenagers, et cetera, as well, because of course, then we'll broaden our audience. I see, Chuck, the metrics, I'm happy to talk with you further about metrics if you want to offline. Of course, there's a ton we could do, and I wish we could do more. But as we grow, we will do a lot more, and we have engaged somebody to measure all of our social media.
There's a question from JS that came in on the chat. Do we know how big our target market is locally?
Yeah, so Lisa, do you want to answer this one, or you want me to go?
You can go
How
ahead.
big is the target?
You know this just as well, and it's a very, very good question, and we talked a lot about focusing on target markets for various types of communication, and you will see as we move forward some things that are targeted primarily to certain audiences, as well as more general communications. But in terms of exact numbers of size, I don't think we have that, do we, Christy?
No, and we don't have like a boundary. Like, we're only going to market as far as Glenview, and anybody west of that is not included. I mean, in the virtual world, that's
Not
kind of
necessary.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And the truth
we're
is
not-
too, can I,
Yeah,
I was just going to jump in, Christy.
It's not relevant local. To that point, does that imply we're going to have a bigger virtual presence in order to expand the market, the potential market? Or are we going to be focusing more on the idea of coming back to 725 Pine Street and then doing more targeted recruiting in the area around, and however you want to define the area, around the North Shore?
I could.
Yeah, Jeffrey,
Lenore,
Jeff, you want to take that? Jeff and I have
just wanna
actually
add
had
one-
many conversations about that, so maybe I'll let you go, Jeff.
I know I want to hear what you have to say. Everyone does, Lenora, but just to add one piece that I think is important. So clearly we have needed to do things differently during this pandemic. We'll continue to do things differently than we had done it before. And there have been some significant pivots, which I think the church has done remarkably well. By church, I mean staff and laity alike. And those will continue to thread forward in whatever we offer and however we communicate, however we gather virtually and remote, not either or. And that will only, this period will only continue to inform how we go forward as church. We're not going to return to a model that looks exactly like it was. And thereby, JS, to your exact question, there's going to be an effort and an opportunity, a blessed opportunity, to communicate to people who may never be able to physically come to our congregation, but who might affiliate with it as if they were physical members here. So we clearly want to broaden the range, and we clearly want to broaden the ways in which we communicate to that range of member. And I'm putting that in air quotes because that's really a term that's starting to kind of fall away actually in terms of church affiliation. But Lenora, what would you add to that?
Well, I would just add that one of the things that the pandemic has done is it's sort of forced people in a lot of ways to move into a virtual space. You know, what is that phrase about your, you know, going over your top of your skis? I mean, it was kind of forced. You had to figure out, well, how are we going to be the church virtually? And a lot of other churches, I mean, many churches had already begun to sort of explore that, but many churches like WCC had not. And I have to say, personally, I've found that it's been a real gift. I think it's a gift to, it's one of the few gifts I felt like we've gotten from this pandemic, but it is one of them, because I really think in terms of millennials, in terms of a younger audience, church going is definitely different, and it's going to continue to be different than it has ever been in our lifetimes. And going to church one Sunday, you know, every Sunday, going to, you know, be in a physical place with people, a couple times a week is not necessarily the way that they want to do things or can do things in their lives. It's just not possible always. And so I think to continue to explore what that means is really crucial to the life of this church going forward. And I think that's part of being open and inclusive in my mind. And I think it opens up doors and opportunities versus shutting them down. And I think as much as everybody wants to get back together in the same room, there are also so many people who could benefit from and would actually love to be with you in other kinds of virtual spaces that may not be able to come to your church on a Sunday morning, and yet could be a really vital part of your community. So it is the new world that the church, in this world the church is moving into, and it's sort of been pushed into a little fast forward on. So I think it's exciting. I think that you've done such a great job. Like, this is incredible. This is an incredible experience. And maybe, not something you would have normally done, but it really already, I probably would not have shown up for a spiritual enrichment time on a Sunday morning, but now I can, and lots of other people, easy to get people in your door quite a bit with experiences that are online first. So
I encourage people to take a look at a couple of comments made in the chat section by Liz Kunkel and Flurry Lynn. I won't read those, but you can just click on chat and you can read them yourselves. Any other questions, especially put it in chat or raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak up. Junia, I see your hand.
I wrote a question, but I'm not sure I know how to get it onto chat. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But first of all, how many millennials live around us, and what are their ages? And secondly, do we publicize how many communities our members already come from? If you look around the room here, you can probably name 5 or 6 different communities that might be helpful to let people know that we're not just Winnetka.
yeah, absolutely. Millennials are actually, they're about 40, up to 40 years old now. So they include my 25-year-old daughter, and they also include 40-year-olds. So it's kind of it's a broad range. And I also will say that, so there's probably quite a few in and around Winnetka. And I would also say that sort of that local community church I can walk to in my neighborhood is not necessarily how people are going to church anymore either. I used to go to a church downtown. I live in Oak Park. I drove 15, 20 minutes on a Sunday morning. A lot of people do that. So it really has much more to do with affinity and community than it has to do with location. So you may find that you will draw people well outside of your area, and you already do, quite honestly. So I think that's really crucial to, that you can have a broader reach and footprint even than you already do.
Anybody else have a response they'd like to offer with their voice or put it in chat? Remember, I can't see your hand if I can't see your face on the screen. So just unmute yourself and speak up.
Jeffrey, one question that had come up last week and in sort of different ways, but had been asked, was a question again. These are wonderful questions, testing and trying to learn more about what the language means. And there was a question about the language. What does it mean to be unabashedly grounded in Jesus? What does that mean? What's the genesis of that? What is that trying to speak toward? And so I just wanted to talk about that for a moment in some of the minutes we have left. So clearly our goal was to message clearly and concretely and compellingly to a broad range of audiences and to communicate who we are and who we're always seeking to become. You see that threaded beautifully, and thanks to Lenora for her wonderful copywriting through the website and in our other digital communications. And part of who we are and where we're going is clearly whose we are. We've heard that phrasing for many years as Christians in our church and elsewhere. And specifically even more, how we see Jesus and how Jesus, we think, helps us to see and engage with the world. So that's really critical. And let's think again about that external audience, inclusive of millennials, but broader than just millennials. and that audience who have in many ways come to feel that, or come to believe that, have reason to believe that Christianity, and more specifically Christ, is an either or proposition. And that's not really where they want to be, in that either or space. You can either have, creedal clarity, or you can have questions, but you can't have both. You can either have, love for your neighbor, or you can be and a respect for other religions, or you can be Christian, and we're not that. So inherent in our DNA as a church, what it is to be a house of worship for all people, and we're always continuing to grow how we understand that and embody that, is this powerful both and, this powerful both and. And so we are grounded in Jesus, yes, without apology, without equivocation, without wanting to kind of pull back and muddle that. It's true to who we are and our founders' intention. And yet we are looking at Christ, if you would, as a cornerstone, but of a house where everybody, many people, would feel comfortable entering, and in fact do feel comfortable entering. So whether you identify specifically as Christian, have always been baptized, always been Christian, always been a Protestant in a congregational church, or you're coming from another Christian denomination, another Christian tradition. If you are someone who's considering Christ, not really sure where you stand with Jesus, trying to figure that out, you're welcome. Christ is our cornerstone, but in a home that's profoundly open to all these different points of view, where there can be a consonance, even when people are coming from different vantage points, have different views, and a place where people who are not going ever to identify as Christian would feel comfortable being and coming, and maybe even use the word worshiping. We leave that for them to decide. We have interfaith couples. You'll find that at our church. There are interfaith couples at our church. And those members of those couples who are not self-identifying as Christian have said, this feels like an open place. And so wanting to make sure we say unabashedly, recognizing that in part talks to that, and very principally talks to that external audience, it also talks to our internal audience too, and who we already have here, and our very both and understanding of who Jesus is. So I hope that helps as we address that point.
Thank you, Jeff. We are at the end of our time, but we do have the video we want to see. All the comments in chat will be saved and available for the team and staff. There was a thoughtful comment at the end of the chat just now posted by Jean Ebersole. We will look at that, Jean. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Christy, over to you for the video.
All right. So we decided not to use this as any promotional marketing thing, but just sort of as a reminder of the wording in this is that elevator speech. And so we loved putting this together. It reminded us of our time all together, and we showed it to the council, and we just wanted to share it with you all because it's a nice reminder of who we are as a church. We are Winnetka Congregational Church, but don't let the church part of our name fool you. We definitely aren't interested in church as usual. We're a church that's both profoundly inclusive and unabashedly grounded in Jesus. A place where you can both be all of who you are and also find the courage to be who you really want to be. A church where your head will feel welcome, and so will your heart. A church full of real, imperfect people with plenty of questions and doubts, but all on a journey together to learn to love God, ourselves, and everyone else on this planet as Jesus loved them. And we'd love to have you join us.